Hey, welcome back to episode 7 of Real Life. This week I wanted to talk all about confidence and feeling inadequate when it comes to content creation. It's a great conversation and I enjoyed it a lot, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Like I've said in the last few episodes, the number one thing you guys could do right now to help me and support this podcast is by sharing it with a friend. Share it with someone who you think might enjoy it. But without taking up any more of your time, here is episode 7 of Real Life. Hey, welcome back to episode 7 of Real Life. We're back for another solo episode. I'm super fired up about this one because I've had a Sunday to do nothing. I'm usually a little bit of I always tell myself I'm going to take Sunday off and then I never end up actually doing it. I'm always sort of tinkering. Is probably the only way to describe how I usually spend my Sundays off. I end up with, waking up in the morning and I'm like, okay, I'm going to relax today. I'm going to work out and then hang out and maybe cook something nice and just chill out, maybe watch a movie or whatever. And for whatever reason, I always wake up in the morning. I have a to-do list that is sort of spilled over from Saturday and I just end up tinkering all day. So today was one of the first Sundays in a long time where the podcast is all that I'm doing today. So I haven't done any real substantial work beyond writing out my journal for my to-do list for tomorrow, because for preference it's 5:30 p.m. So I usually record these as the last thing that I do on my Sunday. So yeah, I just woke up this morning and admittedly I had a bit of a horrible sleep last night, so that was kind of reason for why I took a little bit of an easier Sunday. But yeah, no tinkering, no sort of not doing anything that's kind of not working but is working in the end. It was just a complete day off where I didn't really do anything. I just cooked myself a nice lunch. I worked out this morning. I watched a TV show. I started reading my new book that I got last week, The Resilience Project, which is, I'm only a few chapters in, but I highly, highly recommend it, by an Australian author as well, which is awesome to hear. So yeah, it's been a really relaxing day, which kind of made it a little bit difficult, if I'm honest. Going into these podcasts every week, it's kind of, of course you need time off. You need to take some chill time to yourself. But by working on Sundays, maybe I'll have to shift it to Saturday night or Friday night or something like that, because I actually have just spent the last hour sort of getting myself ready to record the podcast, whereas before it was kind of just like set up the camera and go. Of course, I do a little bit of pre-production. I write down a few dot points and that sort of thing, but I think that my brain just being switched off all day kind of led me to a situation where I just wasn't really ready to go when I sat down and decided to start recording. So I've just spent a lot of the last hour sort of getting myself ready again, amping myself up, sort of dusting myself off and getting ready to go. But I'm feeling good because I have had a nice, relaxing day. I'm probably going to watch a movie tonight. I've had a cup of tea here with me whilst I was setting up for the podcast. It's been a nice, relaxing day. How's everyone's week been? What's everyone been up to this week? This week I actually had a little bit of a funny week, because this week's video on YouTube is all about procrastination. And one of the things about making YouTube videos, especially now that I'm making it within the niche of, self-help is probably a way that I can describe a lot of my videos, but I want to... living creatively is the goal with my YouTube channel. I want to show people, how they can live creative lives and that sort of thing. So it's under that umbrella, but it's, self-help through that umbrella. And the video that I'm making this week is all about procrastination and my sort of steps that I implement, or my sort of boundaries that I set for myself that help me avoid procrastination. And one of the things with making those type of videos is you end up kind of questioning yourself a lot. you end up sort of really asking the honest question of, hey, Tom, I know you're making this video and I know you seem like you're knowledgeable when you're writing this stuff down, but do you actually do this yourself? So that was definitely one of those situations this week where I was kind of having to sit back and question myself a little bit and wonder if I never really want to make, I never ever want to make content that isn't something that I actually do or something that I'm passionate about or something that I have experience in. So this video, just for anyone that's sort of maybe hears that I'm making a video about procrastination and kind of gets a little bit put off and they're like, oh, well, maybe I won't watch Tom's video this week. It's about procrastination, but through the lens of me overcoming my own procrastination. So I had this project that was sitting in my inbox in my email. It was from a client that I really wanted to work with. It was a project I was super excited about, but for whatever reason, I just couldn't get myself fired up to do it. I just could not get myself moving. I had like 4 days left to do it. Had been sitting on it for 10 days. So the video is kind of about, what I did to get over that specifically, rather than making a broad video about procrastination, which for anyone that's thinking about starting a YouTube channel and isn't doing just tutorials and wants to do similar sort of content, that's a really, really good way to tell an easy story. Because at the end of the day, a good story is about a transformation. It's going through a story arc of I was this person and now I'm this person. And if you're making YouTube content, I think you should always follow a 3-act structure, follow the archetypal stories, follow that sort of thing to create, a nice flow, create a really nice, storyline in your videos. Because even if it's just a tutorial, even if it's just a photography trip, or even if it's just you sitting down talking to camera, I think you should always consider how you can tell a story with that particular video. And one of those ways is, when I get to the roundabout way of me saying this, is by showing your own transformation through the topic that you're talking about. So for me, it was going from not being able to do this project to figuring out how to get my brain going and doing this project. And that is a nice story arc from being one place and then getting to the next place. So yeah, that was my week this week. I spent a lot of time really questioning whether it was my place to make that video. But in the end, I made the video. I'm pretty happy with it. I finished the A-roll for it. I just need to record the B-roll and get that all sorted tomorrow. And hopefully, I need to stop saying hopefully. Definitely that video will be out Wednesday for you guys. So I'm super excited about that. I also want to talk briefly about my video that I posted this week, the Starving Artist video. So if you listened to last week's podcast, that was the video that I deleted. So that was actually the second copy of that video. And I think the second one kind of turned out similar to the first one, but obviously, like I said in last week's podcast, I deleted the script, I deleted all the A-roll footage, I deleted all the voiceover. Literally nothing remains of the original video. So in a way, it's kind of cool, the fact that I still got the video out, but there is a copy of that. It's kind of like the infamous editor's cut of the films that never come out, like the Suicide Squad editor's cut that never got released, or the Star Wars Episode 9 editor's cut, or the director's cut that never got released, and that sort of thing. But in a far less intense way. It's just one of my YouTube videos that got deleted accidentally. So in a far less cool way, it's kind of like that, but not at all in a sense. But I just want to talk about that because the response that I've gotten has been incredible. I was really nervous about releasing that because it kind of epitomizes the direction that I want to take my YouTube channel in that I want to make meaningful content. I want to release content that has an impact. I want to release content that leaves you with something. Every single time you sit down to watch one of my videos, I want to leave you with something, whether that be entertainment, education, or what's the third version? Entertainment, education, or inspiration is what I want to do with my videos. I want to leave you with one of those three things. And one of the things that I've realized more and more with YouTube is I'm not a very funny person. That's just not me. I'm not one of those people that you're going to watch to have a laugh. I'm not a Cody Ko or Noel Miller. As much as I admire those guys and as much as I watch a lot of comedy, like the thing is, whenever anyone asks me what I do in my spare time on YouTube, 90% of that time is watching Chris D'Elia's podcast, watching two... God, I can't remember the name of it, but watching a lot of comedians. I spend a lot of time watching comedians, and I really admire what they do. But I'm under no illusion that that's not something that I will ever be. I'm kind of like a 5'4", 16-year-old wanting to play in the NBA. Someone needs to come and just tell me that, hey Tom, I know you really admire those people, but you're never ever going to be a comedian, buddy. Sorry. So it's an interesting thing that I've sort of realized that I'm not much of one to entertain. Of course, my videos are going to be entertaining, but whenever I think of entertainment, education, or inspiration, usually entertainment falls under the comedic relief element for me. I think that people who can master comedy have mastered entertaining content. And not necessarily mastered comedy, but like there's a lot of people that do educational stuff, but they implement. Someone like Benny Productions, for example, is a Photoshop channel, but I think a lot of people follow him for his personality and his comedy. He's quite witty and entertaining to watch, so I think a lot of people watch him for that and not so much the education, but they also stay for the education. So what I've realized with my own channel is I think that I'm definitely more of a an education or an inspiration channel, and I don't want to be a motivational talker. I don't want to be that kind of character because I don't think those characters are very sincere or authentic, but I want to implement a combination of those two, the entertainment and education and inspiration into my content. So by releasing Wednesday's video, the Starving Artist video, it was kind of like the epitome of the direction that I want to take my channel in the sense that I want it to be more impactful. I want it to leave you feeling something. One of the things that I've realized more and more with all of my work is one of the things that I hear from my clients a lot is that your film made me feel something. I think is one of the things that I hear a lot, especially with my sports films, is a lot of those. And of course, those clients, they're watching themselves, and when they see themselves, they get emotional because that film usually represents something bigger than them. So it's kind of unfair for me to take that and think that I have a skill in that area. But one of the things, I think you should always pay attention to criticisms, and you should always pay attention to praises. And one of the things that I hear a lot is your film made me feel something. So I sort of have taken that recently and thought, well, let's try and make content that has an impact. I have a whiteboard sitting just near my shelf over there, and in big bold letters in the middle of the whiteboard it just says make content that has an impact. Because I want to do that. I want to make content that leaves you feeling something, that leaves you with a new knowledge, leaves you with a new feeling, leaves you with a new outlook on a certain thing. I want to give you something every single time you watch one of my videos. So I appreciate the response that you guys gave me on that video. It was really, really confirming to hear. Obviously there was negative as well. There's always going to be negative with your content. If you're going to be a content creator, understand that there's going to be negative feedback, and understand that if there is negative feedback, that's usually a pretty good sign, because it means that you're making content that is affecting someone, either in a positive way or a negative way. When there's people that are positively affected by your videos or your photos or whatever it is that you're doing, there's usually going to be people that are negatively affected. When you're releasing content that kind of makes people feel like meh, it doesn't really do anything for me, but it doesn't do nothing for me, that's great. And sure, you're going to have a lot of people that feel okay about you, but you're never going to have too many people that feel overly positive. And a good sign that your content is a bit is you never have any haters. It's just a lot of people that kind of like your content. Whereas if you're, and you shouldn't always pay attention to this, if people are yelling at you and the things that they're yelling at you kind of make you sit back and go, maybe I am doing that, then that's usually, the truth hurts the most. So if someone's leaving a comment and you're like, damn, that's true, then maybe pay attention to that. But 9 times out of 10, if you're getting negativity that's usually a good sign that you're not in the right direction, but you're making content that has an impact. So, of course, there was negative responses to the video. Some came from personal messages from friends. Some came from, whatever. I did get a little bit of negative feedback, but the vast majority of the feedback, especially on the video, no one's really left a mean comment on the video. I don't think there's any dislikes on the video. Please don't go dislike the video just because you heard me say that in the podcast. I regret saying that now. But yeah, the vast majority of the feedback has been massively positive, and I cannot thank you enough, because that kind of confirms my theory of making content that has an impact is what I need to be doing more of. I will still continue making tutorials. I still will continue doing that sort of thing, but right now, when I'm this early in my stage of YouTube, it's so much about, and I had this conversation on Friday night or Saturday night with a bunch of content creators, and we had a chat. And one of the things that came up was, when you first start out on Instagram, I think you should definitely consider having a niche. If you've got no niche on Instagram, you're never going to succeed, because so much of what helps you succeed on Instagram is consistency and scrolling. Like, when people scroll through your feed, that's when they follow you. They don't follow you from one post. They follow you by going to your feed and scrolling through and really enjoying all of the content there, and then deciding to follow. And that means that you need to be really, really consistent, not only in your posting, but in your niche and in your style on Instagram to succeed. And unfortunately, that means that a lot of people get trapped early on, because they find success really early in their creative career on Instagram, and then they stick to that, and then they get trapped, and then they never really get to pivot, because there's not really any room to pivot on Instagram. Whereas on YouTube, I think early on, and even continuing down the line, I think YouTube is one of the perfect examples of adapt or die. If you don't adapt your content, if you don't continue to develop as a creator, I don't think you can not only find success, but continue to find success. And one of the things that we talked about on this call is that you need to be 99% of content creation early on with YouTube is throwing every different kind of video that you have up your sleeve at the algorithm, at YouTube, and seeing what works. And I'm still very, 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 very early on in my YouTube career. So right now, my goal is just to throw stuff at YouTube and see what works. Throw stuff and figure out what's going to work for me, figure out what my audience enjoys, figure out what I enjoy making the most. And right now, that means, as much as I get asked a lot to make tutorials, when I make a tutorial, usually there's people that ask me don't even watch it. And I think that's another thing that you should pay attention to is usually the people that are asking you to do something, they're not actually going to watch the thing that you're going to do. It's like, how many times as a photographer have you been asked to sell prints? Like, one of them, someone sends you a message asking you to sell a print to them. And then you set it up for them, you organize everything, and then you're ready to go, and then they say they're not going to do it. People don't, it's the same with giving you advice as far as, I want you to make tutorials. I want you to make this. I want you to make that. Usually that's not going to help, because one, that's only one person. And two, that's because that person isn't actually going to watch it in the end. They're probably sending that message to all their favorite creators, asking them to do certain things. And it's just, I don't think that, so right now, roundabout way of saying is, right now I'm really focusing on creating the content that I want to create, whether that be, some weeks that might be a tutorial, or some weeks that might be the style of content that I'm making now. But more and more I'm realizing, especially after the feedback of last video, even though it didn't get an amazing amount of views, it got more views than I'm used to. It definitely got more views quicker than I usually get. But it didn't get an amazing amount of views. It didn't blow up. It didn't go viral or anything like that. But the response that I got from my audience confirms to me that this is the content that I should be making, because it has an impact. And if it has an impact on those people, then it's likely to have an impact on other people. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making it. I really enjoyed scripting it. I really enjoyed posting it. It made me nervous before I posted it, which is probably a good sign that it's important for me to do it. So yeah, that's been my week. This week on the podcast, I really wanted to talk about, because I don't want to ramble on too much more about YouTube and the ins and outs, because I understand that for better or for worse, a lot of the audience that listen to this podcast aren't actually creators, which I find really interesting, but also good, because I really didn't want to get into, and you guys know this, I've said this over and over again, that I really didn't want to. I'm sure there were plenty of people that wanted me to do a filmmaking photography podcast, but I wouldn't have enjoyed that. I wouldn't have been able to do it every single week. I think one of the benefits of this podcast is I get to sit down and talk about things that I'm genuinely passionate about every single week. And you guys seem to really enjoy them. A lot of the reviews on Apple Podcast are people saying, and the negativity as well. The negativity and the positivity are coming from the same places, which comes back to what I've been saying is you, when you get negativity and positivity, usually that means that you're on the right, not necessarily on the right path, but usually that means you're making content that has an impact. And the negativity and positivity in regards to this podcast has been around, I came here for the video and photo information, but I'm glad that I stayed, for the information that I am getting, for the style that I am getting. I'm really enjoying this podcast. Whereas the negativity is the same thing. It's like I came here wanting to learn about photo, video, and all Tom's talking about is self-help and himself and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, well, sorry, I apologize if you are one of those people. There are plenty of great podcasts out there. Polar Pros, Golden Hour podcast, Art of Visuals podcast. There are countless amazing photography, videography podcasts. So go listen to them. I apologize that you came here probably after that, but yeah, maybe you can come back when I have guests on and those might be more interesting for you. But for now, I apologize. Today I really wanted to talk about, funnily enough, something that is very applicable to this industry. But if you are someone that's not in this industry, if you are one of the listeners, keep listening, because this is something that is applicable to all industries. I think it's just something that is particularly damaging for this industry as a whole. I really want to talk about feeling inadequate as a creator, feeling like your work isn't good enough, feeling like you, feeling insecure about the things that you're creating and everything that goes into that. And I'll start out by sort of sharing my experience with it is very early on with this whole journey, very, very early on with photography and videography. I really, really struggled with not knowing what to do, not understanding the ins and outs of this industry, not understanding, how people made money, not understanding how people afforded to travel, not understanding how brand deals worked, not understanding how certain people photographed certain things, not understanding how networking worked, not understanding how to gain followers or anything like that. Because I think that one of the issues with this particular industry is that there's so many ways to do the same thing. There are so many ways to make your money. There are so many ways to go about the same thing that it ends up being difficult to find a path to follow. It ends up being really, really difficult. And one of the things that we compound with that is there's so few people in this industry. And it's funny because all the people that go about this, all the people that open up and share their story on, how they make their money, how they do what they do, how they, all the people that are really authentic in this industry usually succeed because it's so rare. Unfortunately, it's so rare for people to do this sort of thing that you have a perfect combination of like a million ways to do the same thing. There's a million ways to make money in this industry. There are so many ways. Any creator that you talk to full time, they'll usually have, 8 or 9 passive income streams. They'll have, their active income streams coming from brand deals and collaborations and clients and all that sort of stuff. And then they're also doing a bunch of other stuff on the side that is completely unrelated and makes them money. Myself, for example, I have like 4 or 5 passive income streams that make me a little bit of money. I have, which includes like YouTube, stock footage, presets and LUTs and all that sort of stuff. And now I'm getting my print store up and running. And then I also have my clients, which pay for the majority of my income. And I think that the issue, comes in that is that there's a lot of people who, won't share how they make their money, and then also make their money in obscure ways. So it's like you end up with this situation where people who are new to this industry, they see someone who calls themselves a full-time YouTuber and they don't understand that to be a full-time YouTuber, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're making all of your money on YouTube. To be a full-time Instagrammer, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're making all of your money on Instagram. That means that the only active thing that you're doing to drive your income is posting on YouTube, posting on Instagram, which then leads to you making more money from your passive income streams. And one of the things that really, really annoys me about that is it leaves a lot of people, and myself included, feeling really, really inadequate and really, really confused early on. It only really takes one person to come out and say, hey guys, this is how I make my money. This is how I do everything. This is what's going on behind the scenes. Like, if you want to do this, all you need to do is begin working along these lines. And of course, there's no one trick. There's no overnight success. That doesn't exist. And I'll get into that later in this podcast, but there's so many ways to do the same thing, and so many people not sharing anything, that you end up with this situation where it's just confusion. You end up like a deer in the headlights, not knowing what the hell to do. So I think that that's a really, really big issue with our industry. Is that there's just not enough people sharing authentically. And there are people sharing, but some of those people sharing aren't even being sincere and being genuine in the way that they're sharing what they do. You know, it comes back to that, you know, I'm a full-time YouTuber. It's like, but how do you make money? Oh, I actually have a online business that makes me money from passive revenue that comes in from digital products and all that sort of stuff. It's like, oh, so you're not a full-time YouTuber. It's like, oh yeah, probably not. There's so many of that sort of thing going on that it can be really, really difficult for creators to find their footing, find what they're doing. And then the other side of this is, have any of you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? So it's essentially a way of describing how it's applicable to everything. Literally everything that you can become a master at, this is applicable to. So if you aren't a photographer, if you aren't a filmmaker, if you aren't a creator, essentially what it means is that your x-axis or y-axis, I'm terrible at math. So you have your competence and confidence axes. So your confidence axis is the up and down one. Your competence axis is the left to right one. And it essentially works like an upside down or a U shape. You start out really confident and having no competence, and then you move into having zero confidence and okay competence, and then you move into having competence and confidence in the same way. So it's like a big U shape. And I think this explains it really, really well, because how many people do you see in this industry early on? Like, it's the classic, and I'm included in this 100%. How many people do you see starting out in the industry where they're super, super confident in their own ability? They have zero, like they haven't developed their photography skills at all. Like, they might have a little bit. I was exactly the same. I thought that I was the hottest shit coming into this industry. I thought I had an amazing natural talent with photography. I thought I was incredible. I was wondering why I didn't have more followers. I was wondering why I didn't have success. I was so confused as to why people weren't flocking to throw money at me. And it was because of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I had this massive amount of confidence that came from, I was a painter for years. So I thought that, I was a painter for years, so maybe that correlates and transfers over, and now I'll be good at photography. When in reality, yeah, a little bit of it transferred over, but all of that confidence was just from this naturally. And you'll find this in any industry. You start out with a massive amount of confidence in your own ability with zero actual ability, because it's just, I don't know what it is. I don't know what happens. It must be because you know less about the topic that you're learning from. So by knowing less, you think that you know more. I don't know what it is that involves it, but I think it's what leads to a lot of the, early on when you do things to hack the system as far as gaining followers, or you spend a lot of time focusing on things like the algorithm. I cannot tell you how many times I get messages from people being like, hey, Tom, we're starting an engagement group on this, and this, and we want you to jump in. And I just send them a message. I send them the same message every single time. I'm like, dude, the moment you stop worrying about how many likes you get, the moment you stop worrying about all of this crap, is the moment you'll start being a better creator, because then you can focus on being a better photographer, being a better filmmaker, and getting better, and then people will find you. But these people have this idea, and it's just beginners in general. I'm not singling out any one person. In fact, I was this person, is they have so much confidence, no ability, so they can't understand why their work hasn't been seen by more people. How many of you, like when I first started out, I thought the photos I was posting were incredible. And now if I go back and look at them, I cringe at how horrible they are. That's a fantastic thing. That means I've gotten better. But I cringe at how horrific those photos were, how over-edited, how oversaturated, and just horrific those images were. Even recently, like as late as, I can't really go back to any of my photos from even 2018 and have any confidence in them because they're all way over-edited. They're all oversaturated as hell. They all just look horrific. And it's just because I was going through this stage of sort of losing that confidence. And now I'm genuinely in the stage where I if I'm being perfectly honest with you, I lack a lot of confidence in my own ability. I don't really look at my own films and go, these are incredible. I don't really look at my own photos and think this is incredible. 9 times out of 10, I look at my own content and think, this could have been better. Like, I wish this was better. I wish this was, I'm one of those people that's constantly looking at new gear. I try to avoid buying new gear as much as I possibly can. I say that as I speak into a microphone that I bought specifically for a brand new podcast. But as far as I'm definitely in that stage right now where I lack a lot of confidence. And that's because I'm going into the intermediate to advanced stage of my creative career in that industry. I'm no longer a complete beginner, so that overbearing confidence in my lack of ability has disappeared, and I've entered the state of unconsciously competent, or maybe I'm just unconsciously incompetent. So it goes from unconsciously incompetent, where you have a massive amount of confidence in zero ability. You then move into unconsciously competent. You then move into consciously incompetent, where you know that you're bad, you know that you're a beginner, and then you move into unconsciously competent, where you don't understand that your content is getting better, you still critique yourself, and then you move into consciously competent, where you have full confidence in your own ability. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. If any of you have your phone out right now, Google it, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Download the graph, put it on a whiteboard. It'll make a lot of sense to you. But yeah, it's just been really, really eye-opening for me, because it makes a lot of sense as far as why creators feel inadequate. I want to bring this back to the reason why I wanted to bring this topic up is because whether it be right now that you're a beginner and you can't understand why more people aren't seeing your content, whether it be that you're someone like me who, is in a stage where some days you're confident in your own content, you're confident in your ability, and some days you're not confident in your content, you're not confident in your ability. Some days you're really proud of your work, some days you hate it. Whether you're in that stage or whether you're a little bit further along and you're becoming more confident in your own ability, you've been doing this for a few years. I think the number one thing that you can all focus on is, and something that is relevant to every stage along this, and something that this is a message to those of you that send me messages on a daily basis being like, hey, have you noticed a drop in engagement on Instagram? It's like, I don't care about a drop in engagement on Instagram. I do not care. As long as there's people who can still succeed on Instagram, then it means that engagement doesn't matter. It means that it's still possible. It means that you need to stop worrying about it and focus on your content. Whether you're that person or whether you're the person that I really look up to and admire, and I think your work is amazing, I think the number one thing that we can all concentrate on is getting your 10,000 hours in, getting better at your craft, focusing on being a better creator above all else, because that's what's going to help you out the most. That's what's going to get you further along the line and get you through to the goal of being consciously competent in your own ability. Mastery is the goal, but that mentality is never the goal. I think you should always have a learning mentality. And I think the people that get really, really good are the people that never give up on learning, the people that never, stop learning. They always focus on getting better. They never really consider themselves perfect or complete as far as their level of what they can learn. But I think the sooner that you can get to the point where you're confident in your own ability and you have competence, then that's when you can start to, your ideas can get manifested just as fast as the ideas come to mind. It's the same thing with learning Photoshop. I think learning Photoshop is probably one of the, easiest signs of this. Is when you first start out, you might know one or two tools really, really well, and you have confidence in your own ability, when in reality you don't know anything. And then all of a sudden you realize how much you can do in Photoshop. Maybe you find a mentor that does crazy stuff in Photoshop and you're like, I've got no idea what I'm doing. I have zero idea where to even start. Then your confidence drops, but you're actually getting better because now you know more than you did going in. And then eventually you get to the point where your ability in Photoshop lines up with what you can think of. So right now, for example, I do not consider myself to be a master at Photoshop by no means. I just know that right now, for what I'm creating, for what I need to do, for what I want to do on a daily basis, the content that I'm making, my knowledge is equal to my thought. So as I think of ideas, I have the ability to create those ideas because I have enough knowledge in Photoshop to support that need. So it's kind of a good representation of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Is when you first start out, you don't know as much, so you think you're better than you are. And then at the end, you know enough to suit what you need to do, and therefore you're confident in your own ability. So I think that it's important to remind yourself, if you are feeling inadequate, if you are feeling like your content isn't good enough, if you are feeling like, why can't my videos be as good as those people? Why can't my photos be like that person? Or why can't I do that? Why do I lack this skill that this person has? Why do I lack that X factor that this person has? Like, for me, for example, I look at Karl Shakur's feed on a daily basis and I think, what the fuck is wrong with me? What's wrong with my content? Why can't I do that? What is missing with my skill? What is missing with my talent? I look at someone like, for example, Matt D'Avella as a documentary filmmaker. I look at someone like him as like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do that? When in reality, it's just a case of, those two people. I'm sure he's been a photographer for years. I'm sure he's been photographing for 6, 7, 8 years. I'm sure Matt D'Avella has been photographing filmmaking for years. And I think that's the most important thing for me to remind myself, and something that provides me with a lot of comfort whenever I am feeling inadequate, whenever I am feeling, like I lack confidence with my own work, if I feel like I'm not good enough, is just reminding myself that, you can get better. You can get better. You will get better at this. You can get better at this. There's always room to improve. No matter how good you get, there is always room to improve. And I think that's the number one thing that you can continue to remind yourself of, is that you can get better. There is always room for you to get better. And I think that is the only thing at the end of the day that you can remind yourself of every day, is that there is always the possibility for you to get better. So if you're right now, not understanding where you could be, not understanding why you're not where you want to be, just focus on getting better. Because by doing that, it'll help you out a lot. And it comes back to, as well, it's like the whole idea of, and I think I'll probably do a whole episode on overnight success and the idea of an overnight success, but it's the same thing. It's like, I think that the issue with our industry is there's so many, it's like the old saying, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. And it's the same thing. There's so many ways to get to where you want to go in this industry. There's so many ways to find success. There's so many ways to make money. There's so many ways to even photograph or film make. There's multiple camera brands. There's multiple styles. There's multiple, there's so many different ways that you can do the same thing. And so many people sharing different ways, and so many people not sharing anything at all, that the idea of an overnight success is so much more present in the creative field than it is in any other. It's like for something like, being a scientist. No one really looks at a PhD professor who has no one really looks at someone like that who is well established in the industry, well respected, no one really looks at that person and goes, they're an overnight success, because it's very obvious. Their path is very obvious as to what they did. They spent years educating themselves. They spent years. They could have spent their 10,000 hours just educating themselves and then got into practicing and learning more within the actual world after that point. So it's very, very obvious as to what they've done. Someone like a lawyer, a well-respected lawyer who is very successful, no one looks at that person and goes, overnight success. They just got this very, very quickly. Like, they didn't do any work. It's like, no, it's very, very obvious as to what they did to get to where they are. Whereas with a creator, with a filmmaker, with a photographer, you can be someone who, you could blow up tomorrow. Like, I've said this in another podcast. I think I said it in Ben Mack's podcast like a while ago. I said that, if you've got 15,000 followers and then you post something and then you gain 100,000 followers, that's 100,000 people who've never ever seen you. Even though those 15,000 people know you've been grinding, know you've been working hard, know you've been getting better over years, those 100,000 people just found you today. They didn't know you existed before today. So you, to them, are an overnight success. You, to them, are what you can call an overnight success. And it comes down to that. It comes down to examples of where people blow up really quickly on social media. It comes down to examples of where people catch updrafts. Someone like Billie Eilish, it's like she's only 18 years old. But if you go back and listen to her story with her brother as far as producing music, like, she got her 10,000 hours in by the time she was 15. So you need to always pay attention to what goes on behind the scenes. It's like, you can be someone who, and I love this example because it happens a lot. Someone like Matt D'Avella is a perfect example of this. He blew up on YouTube in about less than a year. He went from someone who's not successful. Peter McKinnon, for example, is another exceptional example of this. Peter McKinnon, Matt D'Avella, great examples of this. Both of those guys. Peter McKinnon worked for a magician company or a magic company where they made tutorials on how to do magic tricks and sold that to other magicians so they could learn magic tricks. They made in-depth tutorials on how to do magic tricks. He did that for years. He was also a photographer on the side as well, but he was doing those tutorials, those magic trick tutorials, for years before he even made a YouTube video. That is the perfect training for YouTube. So when he got onto YouTube, he already had camera presence. He already knew how to engage an audience with a tutorial. He was making tutorials that people were paying for. Now he gets to make them free. So those tutorials, it's just, people see his 9 months where he blew up as, he's just lucky. Overnight success. It was because he focused on, posting videos that were primed for the algorithm. It's like, no, he did none of that. He did his 10,000 hours before he even got on YouTube. So when he finally got on YouTube, he was finished with his 10,000 hours. Now was the time where he could, go and implement those skills and show the world what he's capable of. It's the same thing as Matt D'Avella. Matt D'Avella was an established documentary filmmaker before he was even on YouTube. He had a Netflix, he has a documentary that's on Netflix. He's an established filmmaker who ran a video production company for years, doing client work, doing that sort of stuff on the side before he ever even posted a YouTube video. So by the time he got to posting YouTube videos, sure, he had to go over the hurdle of, being more comfortable in front of camera, turning the camera on himself. I'm sure there's a lot of filmmakers out there that are like, I'm very capable as far as being a filmmaker, but as soon as I turn the camera on myself, I really struggle. But I think that you need to pay attention to what these people have done before they get into this, because the unfortunate thing about the creative industry, and this happens in every form of creativity, is as soon as someone succeeds, everyone calls you an overnight success because of the fact that it's unclear as to how you got there, because there are so many ways that you can get there. There's so many different ways for you to achieve the same thing that unfortunately it ends up in the situation where people will call you an overnight success regardless of how many years you've been doing this. You could have been doing this for 20 years. You could be in your 40s, finally getting yourself on YouTube, finding the confidence to do this, and then you get on YouTube and then you blow up, and you blow up really quickly because your content is brilliant. And people will call you an overnight success. Sorry about the doorbell there, guys. I can't really control how loud that is. But yeah, I think you need to pay attention to what people have done before. And of course, there's examples. There are examples of people that, do really, really well straight out of the gate. There's young kids that get on YouTube and they're natural in front of camera and all that sort of stuff. There's people that just pick up a camera and they have a brilliant eye and they know what they're doing. And sure, those people are good, but the quicker you rise, the faster you fall is the same thing. And I think it's very difficult for people to, for someone to maintain that early on because you haven't developed that experience. So I think you should always pay attention to the moral of this entire podcast, the moral of everything that I've said in this podcast, because I have been a little bit erratic. I've been sort of, whenever you're making a podcast, I sort of listen to myself as I'm talking. I always try to think about what I'm saying before I'm saying it. And as I'm listening to myself, I'm like, all right, Tom, you're being a little bit rambly here. I don't think these are cohesive thoughts. Or maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not sure. Not sure, to be honest. But I think the overarching idea that I want to express in this podcast and the goal of today's podcast is if you're feeling inadequate, if you're feeling like your work isn't good enough, if you're feeling insecure about the content that you're making, if you just finish something and you're like, I don't like this, I don't think this was any good, then I want you to just go back to the drawing board and focus on getting better, because that's all you can do. You can't control how people perceive your content. You can't spend hours priming the algorithm and studying how YouTube videos go viral and studying how Instagram works and all that sort of stuff and copying other creators. You need to stop doing that and just focus on getting better, because everyone has the ability to get better. Everyone has the ability to get better, and that is all you can focus on. If you're having a day where, and this is something that you can implement day to day, if you're having a day where you just don't feel super inspired, then find a way to get better that day at a particular part of your skill. Maybe it means watching a few YouTube tutorials. Maybe it means picking up your camera and taking some photos of things that aren't going to be shared with the world. Maybe that means, reading some theory on storytelling. Maybe that means watching a documentary and taking notes. Maybe that means compiling a few of your favorite scenes into a little inspo reel for yourself from your favorite movies, and you can study those scenes frame by frame. This is all stuff that I've done. I have a little notebook that I've printed out my favorite scenes from films, and I've got them printed out, and it just shows me how these scenes were shot and what certain things were used to implement that style. And now whenever I watch a movie, I'm sort of like, okay, that was shot on an 85 that looks really, really nice at this style. I wonder why they decided to go with that. This person frames their shots like this. This film shot handheld, but like, why did they shoot handheld? What's the reason for shooting handheld? Why would you want to do this over using this? Like, there's all these little things that you can do outside of just posting content that can help you get better. So I think that the number one overarching thing that I want to get in your heads as you're listening to this podcast is focus on getting better. One, because that's the only thing you can control. That's the only thing you can do. And two, because it's the most important thing at the end of the day. It's the only thing that is actually going to make you more successful. You can study the Instagram algorithm. You can study YouTube as much as you want. You can study the greats. You can study anyone who's succeeding on those platforms. You can do that as much as you want. But unless your content is getting better, there is no way that you're going to succeed. Mic drop. That's all I wanted to say today. I just think that there's, and myself included very early on, it's like I wasted so much time concentrating on the things that didn't matter. I wasted so much time, focusing on stuff that just doesn't matter. Focusing on what camera certain things were shot on, what camera someone uses, what lens they shot this with, how much it would cost to go travel to these destinations, wanting to travel to these destinations, when in reality, it's like all I needed to concentrate on was figuring out how to be a better storyteller. Maybe I could have dedicated hours of that time where all I was doing was watching YouTube videos about how to post more engaging videos and how to prime your tags and all this bullshit. It's like, when in reality I could have been reading about archetypal stories and and the three, like, certain ways to implement 3-act structures into certain films and documentary filmmaking and all this lighting, all these things that I'm now spending a lot of time learning about. Lighting is something that I'm learning a lot about recently. There's so many things that I'm learning about now that I just wish I learnt about earlier on, but I was wasting so much time concentrating on things that really did not matter, concentrating on things that just do not change my content. Because at the end of the day, it's your content that's going to make you successful. It's your content that's going to make people engage with what you're doing. It's that is going to control your success. So the less that you worry about the shit that doesn't matter, and the more you start concentrating on getting better, the more you start concentrating on learning your craft, the more you start treating your photography, the more you start treating whatever it is that you're doing creatively as something you need to master, as something you need to learn about. Treat it like a university course. Start reading about people in the industry. Start learning about certain techniques that people use. Start studying films. Start treating every single time you watch a film, and obviously maybe don't do this when you're watching a movie with your girlfriend, but start treating watching movies as study. Start treating watching documentaries as study. Write down how they crafted their story, how they did certain things, the way they phrased their questions, the way they framed shots, what lens they used, how they, all these sort of things that they used, where they made transitions in the music, what music they chose for certain things. It's like all these little things are things that you could be doing in replacement to that time that you're worrying about bullshit. So I'm going to try and wind this down, but essentially that's all I wanted to talk about today is what you can do when you're feeling inadequate, what you can do to get yourself out of that rut of my work isn't good enough, because at the end of the day, no one thinks their work is good enough. Not even the best photographers in the world think their work is good enough. Not even the best filmmakers in the world think their work is good enough. You just get more confident in knowing that you're capable of making good things. So I'll leave it at that for today. So that's about it. I think we're finished with today's episode. That has been episode 7 of Real Life. I've been harking on and on and on about this, so you guys are probably very sick of me saying it, but you guys have helped me out massively. The numbers on this podcast continue to rise per episode, and I am under no illusion that is because you guys are sharing this podcast around with people. It is making a tremendous difference. I think we're building an amazing community on here of people that are genuinely interested in this sort of style of content. And I'm, I really don't like to concentrate on the numbers, but the fact that there are a lot of you really, really enjoying this, it really makes, really gives me confidence to do this sort of thing more. Really gives me confidence to open myself up and to be more authentic and to share more of myself on this podcast. So as much as the numbers don't matter, I will always encourage you to stop worrying about the numbers like I have done in this entire podcast. But knowing that there are people that enjoy this podcast gives me the confidence to go after it and continue doing this sort of stuff and creating this style of content. So if you do want to help me out, if there is something that if you are listening to this podcast every single week on Monday or whenever you listen to this podcast, and you want to support me, you want to do something to help me out, I don't want your money, I don't want anything else. The number one thing you can do to help me out right now is to share the podcast around. Share it with a friend, share it with someone you know, share it with a neighbor, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mum, your dad, whoever it is, your brother, your sister. Share the podcast with someone you know who you think would enjoy it, and let them know to give it a listen, give it a chance, and see what they think. So yeah, that has been episode 7. I hope you enjoyed. I really, really do hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next week.